Hi, my name is Christy Worrell, and I'm a co-founder of Level the Field Fund. I just want to start off by thanking everybody for joining us this evening, and to give a special thank you to those of you who've already donated to Level the Field. My co-founder, Karen Lipsey, who you'll hear from later, and I started Level the Field Fund to address an important financial problem that's really prevalent today, funding a college education. Level the Field provides last dollar grants. That means grants at the end of the line when all other funding sources have been exhausted to seniors at HBCUs, that's historically Black colleges and universities. Now, this webinar is advertised as free, and it is, but if you like what you hear today and you find the information useful, or if our mission resonates with you, please consider a donation to the fund. A few housekeeping items. We've allotted time for your questions, so we ask that you please use the Q&A function to type them in, and we'll do our best to get to each of them. The event is being recorded, and we'll put excerpts from it on our website, www.levelthefieldfund.org. I'd like to introduce our speakers tonight. Our featured speaker, Michelle Singletary, is the nationally syndicated personal finance columnist for the Washington Post and the author of 4 books, including What to Do with Your Money When a Crisis Hits and the 21-Day Financial Fast. She frequently appears on national TV and radio programs, including NBC's Today Show, ABC's Good Morning America, CNN, and NPR. She also hosted her own national TV show, Singletary Says, on TV1 for 2 years. She's received numerous awards for excellence in journalism, including 2 Loeb Awards. That's like the Oscars for business journalism. Awards from the National Association of Black Journalists and the Washington Post's highest journalistic honor, the Eugene Meyer Award. In 2024, she was inducted into the University of Maryland, that's her alma mater, College of Journalism Hall of Fame. Mary Robinson Carter is a first vice president and senior financial advisor at Merrill Lynch in Washington, D.C. She advises high-earning professionals, business owners, and first-generation wealth creators through complex financial transitions. She specializes in building, protecting, and strategically deploying wealth in uncertain markets, particularly around business sales, leadership changes, and generational planning. Known for her thoughtful, client-centered approach, Mary integrates financial strategy with personal values and legacy goals. She is also a leader in her firm and an advocate for expanding access to financial education for women and underserved communities. We couldn't think of 2 people better equipped to help us make sense of saving and investing in today's market environment. Without further ado, I'll turn things over to Michelle Singletary and Mary Robinson Carter.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Mary Robinson Carter, and tonight's conversation is Uncertain Markets, Certain Futures. The objective is to bring practical clarity to financial decision-making, particularly at a time when headlines can drive more reaction than the underlying fundamentals justify. I am joined by the illustrious Michelle Singletary, and I have to say, Michelle, hearing all of your accolades, I am just in awe and so honored to be here with you. She is a nationally syndicated financial columnist for the Washington Post, and Michelle has built her platform on helping people make disciplined, values-based financial decisions, especially when money is tight and the stakes are real. So in my role advising individuals and families, I see how uncertainty shapes behaviors in real time. So tonight, I'm super excited for us to focus less on predictions and more on decision-making frameworks that actually hold up. So before we begin, I do just want to share why the organization that we're supporting, Level the Field Fund, is personal to me. When I was in college, I had a scholarship that I depended on. And the 2008 financial crisis came and that funding was taken away. I had no idea that could even happen, but that's what happened when you get a scholarship from a private organization. And I worked 2 jobs while I was in school to stay enrolled. And I even had a professor help me find additional scholarships and grant funding. But even then, it wasn't enough to cover everything. Even something as simple as parking fees became a barrier for me to walk across the stage. And because of that, I didn't graduate on time. They let me walk because my GPA was good enough, but I didn't receive my actual degree until August, which was months later, once I was able to pay what remained. And so I was super grateful that my employer allowed me to, well, continue to hire me even without my degree. And I was able to work to pay off those expenses and get my degree. But when we're talking about financial gaps, right, they're often not large, but they're very decisive. And so, Michelle, what I've always respected about your work is that you don't just talk about money in theory. You talk about it in the context of real life, real trade-offs, and real discipline. And so I would love for you to share your own story and what shaped your philosophy around money.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. This is such a great organization. And I hope people use that QR code to donate. And no dollar amount is too small because when you're a student, $20, if you've got $100 parking ticket, that's, you're very close to paying it off or closer to
Yes,
paying it
yes.
off. College is very important. I'm one of the first generation in my family to go to college. Now, I had a full ride to the University of Maryland. When I say full, it was full. Tuition, room and board, and books. And I got a summer internship paid. It was a journalism scholarship. So everything was covered, or so I thought. But when you get to school, you realize you need to get back and forth to home,
Hmm.
clothes.
Hmm.
How do you eat when the dining hall is closed? The feminine stuff women need. I mean, there was a lot of
Hmm.
expenses that I hadn't quite anticipated, even though I was on a full ride. And so I saved all my money from my summer job, but I ended up having to get work while I was on campus. And I actually even talked the newspaper into letting me come and work and get a paycheck during breaks.
Oh,
And so
wow.
there were times, most of the time I was in college, I could not afford to go home.
Yeah.
My grandmother, I was raised by my grandmother, and she lived in Baltimore, so she had a circle. She went to work and church and the grocery store, right? And the idea of her driving from Baltimore to College Park was just beyond her.
Oh,
So she
wow.
dropped me off at college as a freshman year, and then after that, I had to kind of figure out how to get back and home,
Oh,
back and
wow.
forth, even when it was time to move out. And so I couldn't even afford a lot of times. I'm gonna cry. I couldn't even afford the bus fare to go home. I mean, I
Oh,
had to try to stretch that money,
yeah.
and so I am quite aware of how difficult it can be for people, even if you're on a full scholarship or partial scholarship, where
Yeah.
you feel like you have to get loans. It can be really tough, and
Hmm.
especially if you can't go home as much.
Yeah.
And I got permission to tell this story. I hope my niece is on, and I won't call her name, but she was an excellent student. And it came
Uh-huh.
time for her to go to college. And her parents had some money problems. And so they couldn't even qualify for Parent Plus loans. And so I
Oh,
remember
wow.
being at a cookout at her graduation party. And her dad and her mom came over to my husband and I, and they were like crying because they were like, here's this kid who did everything she was supposed to do, and she can't go to college. And so my husband and I decided right then and there to make sure she went to college. And so we paid for her first year at college. We even paid
That's
for her to stay
amazing.
on campus because we wanted her
Yeah.
to have that first year. And we were like, you can only stay on campus 1 year. And then after that,
Yeah.
we will pay the tuition, but you're going to have to commute.
Yeah.
She went to Bowie University and she lived in Baltimore. But that
Oh,
whole
that's where my
year,
husband went to school.
oh, really? It's a
Hmm.
great school,
Yeah.
right? I love Bowie University.
East State is great.
Now, my husband and I worked with her parents that whole year to help them
Hmm.
get their finances together. And when we went to go pay the tuition, I don't even know if my niece knows this. When we had to go pay her tuition for the fall, the next year,
Hmm.
there was no bill. And I was like, what do you mean there's no bill? And I'm calling the office. It's like, we want to make sure she can go to school. Like, what's going on?
Right, right,
And then I
right.
called her parents, and they were able to pay her tuition. Now, the reason why I tell you that story, because you think, well, how does that have to go with this organization that fills the gap? Well, because she was blessed to have
Yeah.
somebody be able to afford to fill that gap, my husband and
Yeah.
I, because we're good
Yeah.
savers. I was blessed to have a scholarship that was able to cover everything. But there are a lot
Yeah.
of people who don't have that, who don't
Right.
have the
Right.
scholarship that didn't get canceled, who don't have an
Hmm.
aunt and uncle who saved enough that could send them to college. And
Yeah.
so it's very important that, first of all, that we support organizations like this, but then we have this conversation, because
Yeah.
many people listening, you could fill that gap for the people in your lives by
Yeah.
saving. And
Yep.
so, it's very dear to my heart, because every time I talk about the college story, like I couldn't go out to dinner, like parents would come and take them to dinner, and that wasn't me.
Yeah.
That was me
Yeah.
trying to buy my own clothes. In fact, I had to send
Yeah.
money home to help with my siblings who were left
Wow.
back at home.
Wow.
And so, this conversation we're having isn't just about you. It's about your whole family, the whole generation, and how all of us need to be in a position to build wealth. Because this is what this organization can only do but so much. So some of
Right.
you who are watching this, who may watch this later, you may be the one who is going to stand in the gap and the difference
Yes.
between somebody going to college, staying in college, and graduating.
Yes. 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 And I think too, what that really points to is that it's not just about income, it's about structure and access and timing. And what I do with my clients, right? There are levers that we try to control ahead of time, right? So the decisions aren't being made under pressure. Like a lot of
Right.
times I talk to clients and I say, hey, oh, you had like for all my godchildren, for example, I have 529 accounts for them,
Wow.
right? It saves me some money on taxes and it helps
Right.
them out. You know what I
I
mean?
love it.
And
I
that's my
love
little
it.
way of filling the gap. I'm like, I'm not going to give you toys this year. You'll be fine. You're not going to remember it 5 years from now. But when you get ready to go to college and you
Yep.
need to get some food or some books, like you'll know that your G mommy had your back.
I love it. I
So
love it. What a great, great godmother. Oh, that's so
I
wonderful.
try, I try my
Yeah.
best.
We actually did something similar. We promised every kid in our family who got to college that we would cover their books and some personal expenses. And so one of my nieces went to Spelman, and we covered her books the whole time she was there. And then when she went to graduate school, we covered her books plus cost for transportation.
Good.
So we know we try to
That's
put our
important.
money where our mouth is. Like me, you and I,
Yeah.
the things that we do. If we
Yeah.
don't do these kinds of things, how can we try to encourage other people to do it? We're
Exactly.
hypocrites, right? So I've already donated, y'all. I used that QR code before this began to donate to this great cause.
Yeah, no, and let's bring that into the current environment because everything you're saying is so true. And I think, we're calling this environment uncertain, but I really want to separate perception from reality.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, like how does today actually compare to prior periods? What's structurally different versus what feels different?
That's such a great question, because there are periods of time where a lot of people are suffering. The Great Recession comes to mind.
Mhm.
There was so
Mhm.
much job loss, unemployment went up, and people were losing their homes and, their income. This period right now, they call it the K-shaped economy. So, and that's true, right? This is one of those times where it's a little different because we have people who are doing really well and
Yep.
people who are not doing well at all. And that
Yep.
middle group is really small.
Yep.
And so the people who are doing fairly well, I actually wrote a column about this today for the Washington Post. It's like a lot of people are paper wealthy, but
Mhm.
wallet poor. And so
Mm.
they may have money in their homes, or maybe they're
Yeah.
putting money in a retirement account. But if they have a car repair of like $1,000,
Done.
they got to put it on credit, right?
Yep.
So even though their house might be worth something, and they should be putting money in a retirement account, but that there's penalties if you take it out before you're
Yep.
59 and a half. So they can't necessarily tap that money without a lot of costs.
Yeah.
But if they have emergency, they don't have it. And I think that's sort of the difference. And then I
Yeah.
think in this period right here, there are definitely two different groups of people. And some of you might be listening now. You're doing okay as long as you're doing okay, but you're a paycheck away, a job loss away from being on that other side of that K, right? The
Yep.
downside.
Yep.
And I think I try to speak to both groups, because if you're in that up K where you're doing fairly well, man, you should be trying to save as much as you can and keep those
Yep.
debts down. But you, Mary, those are the hardest people I have to follow what we're talking about, and it drives me crazy. You
Yeah.
actually have the money in your budget
Yep.
to and
Yep.
contribute to your retirement account and more. You have it in your budget to get rid of that credit card debt. You have it
Yep.
in your budget,
Yep.
and
Yep.
you don't take advantage of that. It's
Yep.
you can't say that to people who barely keeping the roof over their
Yep.
heads. I mean,
Yep.
what can we say to them but just try to work hard, get more jobs? But there's a whole
Yeah.
swath of people where they could be doing much better.
Yeah.
And I understand why, right? Like this money stuff is really tough. You have a lot of pulls on you. You want to live your life. You got a good job. You want to take those vacations and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they just sort of, like you talked about it at the beginning of this, sort of thinking long term, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes really difficult for a lot of people. So I just want to acknowledge that people are struggling, but I also want to challenge people who are not quite struggling as much as
Mm-hmm.
they think they are. And I think
Yeah.
that is the difference. But as you and I both know, money is the same every decade, every year. The
Yeah.
same principles apply. People think every year there's like something new, like they talk about
Yes.
crypto and all this kind of stuff.
It's the 10% drop this year is different than it was the last time
Right,
because of this new headline. And I'm like,
right.
the fundamentals are the same.
Yeah, the fundamentals are always the same. You're exactly right. Like the market is up, the market's down, and people are like, ah. And
Yep.
you know, one
Yep.
thing I do, Mary, I ask people, like they talk about the Dow, and I was like, what's the Dow? They don't know. They think it's Dow Chemical. You know what I mean? They like panically, and they don't even know what the Dow is. They don't really know what the
Right.
S&P 500
Right.
is. And like the Dow, yes, it's a measure, it's a metric, but that's not the whole market, y'all. And so when you see
Exactly.
it go down, you shouldn't be, I'm certain sure you shouldn't panic because it's your money. Go ahead and scream, but don't act on that panic.
Yeah.
That's why you have to have a plan and
Yeah.
really work with a planner like you,
Yes.
right? Who
Yes.
can kind of
Yep.
walk you through times like this when you want to
Yep.
pull your hair out when the market
Yep.
is going crazy.
Yep. Yep. And that's the importance too of diversification, right? So, and I think a lot of times when I'm talking to people and when they get real, the people that are really uncomfortable, right, when the market drops are the people who have bet it all on black,
Yep.
right? So their portfolio is like 100% Nvidia, 100% Microsoft, or,
Yep.
these hot names. They're chasing the names that they've already heard that were up. And I'm like, you kind of missed the big jump, but that's fine, right? Like I see those portfolios. And then also to your earlier point, they're the people who have really bad cash flow management. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell those people, you cannot out invest a bad budget. If you are spending more than you are making,
Right.
you're always going to hit but so far, right?
Yep.
Because you could max out your retirement account, right? And you could retire with $1 million, $2 million. But if you don't know how to manage your money, you're going to spin that down very quickly, right? It's
That's
not
true.
going to last
Yep.
you the entirety of your retirement. So you're back at step one, right?
That's
Which
right.
is that. And I think what I've noticed consistently about you in the articles that I've read and the books that you've written, right, is you've consistently emphasized financial discipline, right? And I think it takes that financial discipline to say, I'm not going to just put all my money in one sector. I'm going to go to other areas of the market, right? Because I don't expect all of my portfolio to be up at the same time because I know that that means it's not all going to be down at the same time, right? And I also know that I have to be prudent with my money and a good steward of my resources and manage it so I'm not making these fear-based decisions. So, how do you help someone distinguish between thoughtful risk management and fear-based decisions, right? And what tends to be
Yeah.
the cost when those get confused?
I love it. I love it. And I see people are signing on. If you're watching, I like taking notes. You should listen to what she said before. Cash flow. Let's put a pin in that and come circle back around that because that's really the
Okay.
big issue, cash flow.
Yeah.
But in terms of how you manage, the discipline of it, I you have to have a plan. You
Yeah.
really have to have a plan. You got to know you have the funds for short term and
Yep.
sort of midterm and then long term.
Hmm.
And so when my husband and I got married, we had a master plan for our life.
Okay.
We wanted to send out, if we had any children, we wanted to send them to college with no debt. That was one plan. We wanted to pay off our home before one of us retired. We wanted to eventually take vacations at
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
nice places, where you're not
Hmm.
scared to get into bed.
Yep.
You don't have to
Yep.
bring your own
Yep.
sheets. You know? We also wanted to give. Tithing and giving is at the top of our budget. It's not. It
Yeah.
doesn't come after everything else. It comes first.
Yep.
Charitable giving and tithing first off. And so I try to encourage people to follow your values, whatever, those are my values, but whatever your values are, and then put your money in those pockets. And so when the market gets crazy, if you are well diversified, you have a plan in place, you don't have to like act on the panic. Now, I'm going to tell you, go ahead and scream. I scream. And if I be truth be told, I cuss too. I mean, I don't tell my pastor, but, but, but it's okay to release that. But when you start acting on that, that's fear based, right?
Yeah.
Feel what you need to feel. I got a lot of therapists in my family. Like I told you, my niece is like, she's a therapist. She's like, feel what you need to feel. I want to validate those feelings, right? Because many of us are first generation, college graduates, or first generation got any money, and so to see it go down, that hurts, right? Except if you act on that fear, then you will do yourself a disservice. And the way to not act on that fear is if you are not operating with debt, you can let your portfolio do what it needs to do. If you are not overspending, you can let that portfolio do what it needs to do. If you are managing your cash flow, you can let that portfolio do what it needs to do. And my pastor says this. She says a lot of people don't have a money problem. They have a management problem. And so even during the Great Recession, and you probably have heard this before. People go, I lost all my money, or I lost money. And the first question I ask is, did you
I'm like, so you sold it?
Pull out? Did you sell? Because you couldn't have lost money if you pull. Now, you want some money that's not in the market if you're retired. But if you retire at 60 something, you're not going to use all that money, so you have enough to last, I would say about, you're the expert, but I would say at least 2 years. Some experts.
That's what I was going to say. So for all my clients in retirement, we keep 2 years of cash reserves. They're not sitting in cash. It's in like a high yield type of income product, because I think back to 2008, if the market drops 40%, it's going to take you 2 years for it to recover. So we want to have enough money that we can pull from, so we don't have to ever pull if the market's down. So yes, you are 100% right on that.
That's right. So if you got that settled there, then you don't got to panic. If you're not trying to service that, you don't have to panic. If you lose your job, that's a horrible situation. But you got money to last you until you get to the next job. If you pay your mortgage off before you retire, that's like a huge part of your retirement budget. And so when you have these plans, then you can feel what you need to feel, but you don't have to act on that fear.
Exactly.
And that's how my husband and I have managed it. That's how we try to teach our children and the people in our family. Our family, I would talk about money all the time with our family. We have family discussions about it. I fuss when they do stuff when they're not supposed to do it. And so that's what I try to do. First of all, acknowledge that it's okay to be scared.
Yes.
But if you got a plan, then you don't have to panic and make decisions that are not in your good interest. I lost money in the I shouldn't say I lost money. I lost money on paper during the Great Recession. But 4 or 5 years later, I was sitting pretty, right? And so I don't have that story because I didn't pull anything out, because I had decades to go before retirement. And so when you say things like that, I lost money, that says to me that you did not have a plan.
Yep. And I, just to piggyback off of that, I think in my experience, when there isn't a framework or that plan isn't in place, just echoing exactly what you're saying, decision-making tends to default to emotion, right? And that's where the outcomes become less predictable, right? And when we look at asset allocation, right, you always want to think about, okay, so if I'm, allocated 70% of my portfolio to stocks, then I know this 70% could drop 30% one day, right? Can I stomach that? Can I handle that? And, I think that leads me into my next question, because what I often think about when I'm working with clients, right, and individuals, or if I'm doing like financial counseling or coaching, it is okay, how much risk can you tolerate? Because I don't want you to panic and sell, right? So how much volatility can we withstand within your portfolio? So if we're translating that into actual decisions, how do you think investors should be thinking about allocation right now across stocks, real estate, because you mentioned paying off your home, alternatives? I know there's a lot of talk out there right now about the SpaceX IPO. I can't wait to get your opinion on that one. In cash.
Right,
so what mistakes are you seeing most often?
So for those who might not know, asset allocation is just like, think about it as a carton of eggs, right? So you got a carton of eggs, you got 12 eggs. So you don't want to have you can't put all your eggs in that one little slot in the carton, right? So you want to have some stocks, you want to have some bonds, you want to, have some money in cash. And so I think of asset like allocation is, where are you as you're getting close to where you need that money. And it has to move to that point. So let's say you're in your 20s or 30s. Well, you can be more risk averse because you got decades for that money to do what the market does, up and down, and all of this is historical, right? You're the expert, I'll let you talk about that. But historically, the market goes down, it goes up, but when it finally sort of settles in 10-year periods, it's pretty consistent, 8 to 10%, right? If you look at the S&P, so 8 to 10% return on your money, right? And so you need to have pockets to sort of be able to weather the ups and downs. And the best way to weather that is have a very diversified portfolio based on your risk. So like, for example, if you're just really going to get up every night and just be in the bathroom on the toilet because the market is crazy, then you probably need to have a really less risky portfolio, right? Like, because at the end of the day, you got to sleep. But you also have to have growth in your money. The biggest threat to your future money, your retirement, is actually inflation. It's not like a stock is going to tank. It's not like we're going to have a recession. It's inflation. So if you just put the money, people say, I just put it on the mattress, right? That's crazy, because you're going to lose money under the mattress because it won't keep pace with what it costs for you to buy stuff. And so when I first started investing, Mary, you probably come through the screen and slap me. I was in my late 20s. I had all my money in like low cost bonds. Like, it was like crazy. Like, I'm 20 something and all my money in bonds. Like, and I did that because the colleague sitting next to me, this is when they first introduced 401ks. He was about 2 years or a year away from retirement. And he was like, don't put your money in the market, that was for him because he was closer to retirement. It wasn't appropriate for me because I'm in my 20s. But that's what happens. You listen to the person sitting next to you whose situation is not your situation. Now, I wouldn't say he should have had all his money in bonds, because you still need growth in retirement. But I certainly shouldn't have had all my money in bonds in my 20s. And it took a financial planner to go, what in the world? She's looking at my portfolio. It's like, what is this? This is crazy. And so she helped me rebalance my 401k so that I had some equities and I had some bonds. And so going forward, that's sort of how my husband and I looked at it. Now, in terms of alternative and all that kind of stuff, listen, I'm an old school, just plain vanilla. I don't need no crazy stuff, because you missed the crypto phase. Unless you got crypto 20 years ago, you missed it. And I just think it's, and even alternative investments, that's for really, 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 really wealthy people who can afford to lose a lot. Low cost index funds, mutual funds, the basic vanilla, boring stuff that you don't want to hear about. That is how you build wealth. That is how my husband and I have built wealth. We just plain old vanilla. We don't do nothing crazy. In fact, when we do our net worth statement, we don't even look at our house, the equity in our house, because how can you get to that money?
Thank you. This is what I tell people all the time. I'm like, the house is not going to pay your bills.
It's
not. It's not going to buy your groceries. It's not going to buy your medicine or pay your premiums.
Absolutely.
We do the same. And I tell people that
people are like, I got all this equity and people should have all this equity. Yeah. You either have to sell the house or borrow against mortgage. It. And that's a liability, right? Debt against your house is a liability. That does not actually build wealth. So this house, this bookshelf that you see, this beautiful house that we have, it's like, it's where we live. It's only about 12% of our net worth. The rest is in retirement accounts, non-retirement account. And that's the other thing, if you're listening, because we don't talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about retirement. You should have a non-retirement investment account so that you can do some other things in life. Like my husband and I, we pay cash for our cars. And how do we do that? We had a car note way, way back when. Once we pay that off, we put money into a non-retirement investment account. We keep our cars for 10, 15, 20 years. And we put that money into the market. and then it grows. And when it comes time to buy a car, we take the money out, we pay whatever capital gains tax we have to pay, and we got a car
Mhm.
that with no debt. And
Mhm.
so that's sort of how you handle all those fears, by putting in market. And we don't carry debt, and we live below our means. All of these things that you've heard time and time again, that you just put it in practice. You
Yeah.
don't have to do extraordinary things to become
Yeah.
a millionaire.
Yeah.
Just the things that we're talking
Yeah.
about today, everyone listening, y'all could become a millionaire without being in crypto, without buying gold, without buying all these investment properties you can't afford. A well-balanced portfolio, both retirement and non-retirement, will get you there, and it'll be patient growth. I mean, I tell you, I'm just so excited about what you could do with your money if you just stop listening to all the noise and listen to professionals who do this for a living, who know what's the best thing, and picking individual stocks and chasing those kinds of things is not, that's gambling. It's not really investing, in my
No,
opinion.
you are preaching to the choir, and there's so much that I just want to add to that. I feel like we could talk about this for hours, because I often come across people sometimes, when you go out and you're talking to people, let's say you're at a mix or a happy hour, and so it's like, oh, what do you do? Whenever I say what I do, I always get asked, oh, you got a stock tip? What do you, what's the trick? What's the secret? Right. And I'm sure you get the same thing. And I have to tell people, I'm like, my clients that perform the best, they keep it simple.
Yep.
And I also say to people too, I feel so blessed because I work with some really, really intelligent, accomplished individuals, right? People who I'm just in awe of in terms of all the things that they've done. And they completely delegate it to me and say, you know what? This is what I'm great at. I'm going to keep focusing on this,
Yep.
and you keep focusing on this. But it's the people who hear about a stock tip from their friend, and then they want to buy it in their portfolio, and then they're upset because the stock had already increased by like 74%, and now it's down 10%, and they don't move. And I'm like, yeah, because you missed the boat. I'm like, you really have to stay focused and disciplined and not keep chasing the wave.
That's right.
Because oftentimes you're behind it. And I think sometimes, there's a tendency towards extremes, right? So I've done counseling for people who, when they signed up for their TSP, all of that was explained to them was, are you conservative or are you aggressive? They say, oh, I'm conservative. And they put them all in the G fund, right? Which is just a cash account. And they don't ask any more questions. There's no more thought behind it, right? And then I have some people who are like, well, Mary, I want to double my money by the end of the year, so I'm gonna do options trading. And then the next thing I know, they've lost $20,000 in a day, and because of something they saw on Instagram, right? And so, I think that both approaches introduce a different type of risk over time. So
you'd be funny to ask. Listen, Mary, somebody at church was asking me about doing day trading. Now, girl, I just was like, I stood for a second and I couldn't say anything
because you were in church. You were in church, so
I'm
it's
in
like,
church. I was like, you fool! What in the world? I mean, I'm a pretty smart person, but there's no way I would do day trading. That is so crazy. And this person is not saving. They're not like in a retirement account or anything. I was just like, oh, wow. And then one relative, I won't say who, he was sending me notes about, crypto and something like that. And, oh, you should get involved in this. You can make you money. And I'm thinking, I sent a nice little text message. I said, I don't know. Think I'm pretty good at this, because let me think. I put money in a 529 plan for all the kids and they went to college debt free. I don't think I need your tip about crypto.
Thank you. But thank you. I appreciate the effort.
Right.
So thoughtful.
Yeah, really helpful. But no, I think I got this. I'm okay.
Oh man,
oh my goodness, it's just we're laughing, but we really are concerned. I think both of us are concerned about people listening to things that are not in their best interest, and plain old boring investing is the way to go. In fact, I for a couple of years I did help with the NFL rookies. They have a rookie camp, and they ask people to come and speak to them. And I was thinking, in this room is all these like multi-millionaire players, and they are asking about like restaurants and all these different, alternative investments. And I was just thinking, with the money that y'all make, if you just built a nice, solid portfolio with just like index funds, you would do so much better than trying to invest in these things that have high, failure rates, like restaurants and
especially a
clubs.
restaurant. The profit margins are so slim.
Oh my gosh, people really don't.
So
I mean, we sit down and we pay $30 or $40 for a pair of steak. We like, they must be rolling in the money. Their profit margins are so tiny. And so many restaurants go out of business. So many clubs go out of business. But that's the flashy thing. If you make $200 million and you just put it in a nice balanced portfolio at 8 or 9%, you're a multimillionaire for the rest of your life and your kids the rest of their life. But that's too boring for them. Well, okay, be broke then, because they mostly leave broke.
Well, I mean, that's what the stats tell you. That's the picture they paint for athletes. But no, I completely agree. I think, sometimes there's a desire, there's a lack of understanding, and people think that they're missing out on something, and so they're chasing it. And so it is unfortunate, but I that's why I really appreciate you and the work that you do, because I do think that you focus on all of the right things, and you educate people on what that actually is. So what risk today do you think is most underappreciated when it comes to preserving wealth?
That's a really good question. What risk? I would, I would just sort of really go back to, let's just take retirement accounts, for example. And you mentioned it, being too conservative. And people work for the government. When she said TSP, the thrift savings plan, my husband worked for the government, so I'm very familiar with the thrift savings plan.
My husband does too.
I know, right? Get me with them government jobs. Well, it used to be like that, but
I need myself a man with a good government job.
Right. So I would say not taking enough risk is a risk, right? And then taking too much risk is a risk. And so, I think that people really need to educate themselves about what that means. So, because when the market is going crazy, I have so many people like, I'm going to move everything to the G fund. It's like, please, gosh, please don't do that. Or they're scared of the C fund. These are different funds. The C fund is sort of equivalent to like the S&P 500, sort of. And so I think there's a lot of risk in not properly looking at how you want to invest and watching it. You'll talk to people who don't open their statements, who actually don't even know what they're invested in. And the thing is, they've got the message to invest, but if you ask them what's in there, they don't really know. And one of the things I've been trying to encourage people is to know your numbers, know where your money is going. If you don't understand it, do some research. What are the portfolio, not the portfolios, but what are the funds that you're in? Maybe a life cycle fund is better for you if you're not going to watch it. So, and I hope I answered the question, but I just, when we think of risk, we think of it in just so extremes, right? Individual stocks, or we mentioned crypto, or I wrote a column about the current administration trying to get alternate, investments into 401ks and things like that. And I'm thinking those people don't even realize what's in there already. Just introducing these risky products. The upside is really up, but the low side is really low. And I would rather not introduce that kind of risk to everyday people's portfolios.
No, I like that. I think that's really helpful. And so, so far we've talked about market uncertainty and behavior, right? And how that leads into decisions and mistakes and positioning. So I now want to bring this into something that's really tangible, because this is where those decisions become real. And so you've talked about, how you've paid for the books for your family members when they've gone to college for their children and stuff. But in your experience, right, I'm sure you've gotten a lot of questions from people writing in. When it comes to paying for college, what are families getting wrong today? And not just in saving. but in
Yeah.
how they structure funding decisions around like debt and flexibility. What are you seeing?
You know what? Actually, I'm going to take that back. The number one mistake they make is letting a teenager decide where they're going to college. That's the number one mistake.
That one,
Number one.
that one, that one.
Because we in this country have said, and
Yeah.
it's true, they do all they're supposed to do. They good grades. You can apply wherever you want, baby, and we'll figure it out. But that's a 17 or 18-year-old who knows, no offense, right? Nothing. So
Mhm.
I have
Yeah.
parents, well, they get to
Yeah.
decide. No, they do
No, they don't.
not.
They don't.
And
Yeah.
and because you let them make that decision, then you end up to the next big mistake is
Yep.
taking on too much debt,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And that really bothers me. One of the when I have a program at my church. It's called Prosperity Partners Ministry, and it's a
Mhm.
year-long program. We meet every month. I teach classes every month for about 2
That's
hours,
beautiful.
and I would say, Mary, so many of them have student loan debt that is
Yeah.
just unmanageable. I mean,
Yeah.
20, 30, 40, 50, 60,
Yeah.
100, $200,000. And
Yes.
we're not talking about doctors or lawyers.
Yep. Oh, I know. I
And
know. I
and they
know.
let these kids go to these schools that they can't afford.
Yep.
And then they take on debt. The kids take on debt. They take on debt.
Yep.
And then they spend decades. Now, it is true that a college education next to someone who has a high school, lifetime, maybe about $1 million more in income. But a lot
Mhm.
of that money is to service debt. And a lot of
Yes.
that debt is student loan debt. And
Yes.
so, my number one, our rule in our house was you don't get to decide. Actually, you
Yeah.
do have a decision. You have a vote. It's me, my husband, and you. And since we got 2 votes and you got 1, right? And we told them you could apply wherever you want, but if you don't get enough money to match the free money that we have saved up, then you
Mhm.
cannot go. Now, my
Yeah.
oldest wanted to go to UNC. It's a beautiful school. We went down there.
Mhm.
She painted her room in UNC colors. She was like, if I
Yeah.
don't go, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Mommy, I'm just going to die if I can't go. We went there. They told us how much it was going to be, like 40 or 50 a year. And it was like,
Yeah.
you're going to just die because you can't go to UNC. You can go to University of Maryland. And so we said, we vetoed that. We was like, oh no, honey, no. And I mean, she literally had her room in the
Mhm.
everything, broke her little
Yeah.
heart. But we would not let her go into debt, and she couldn't borrow enough without us if we
Yeah.
allowed her to borrow.
Yep.
And you know what? She had a great college career at the
Yeah. I'm
University of
sure she
Maryland
did.
College
I'm
Park.
sure she
And
did.
and we had enough money left over in our 529 plan to send her to graduate school debt free as well. So
That's amazing. Yeah.
and the same thing with our son. The same thing
Yeah.
now. Our youngest child, we paid for the first year, but then she got a scholarship for the other 3 years. Now check this out, Mary.
Mhm.
She want that 529 money. She's like, that's her money. She got a scholarship. I'm like, baby, that's our money. But we are using it in case she goes for her master's and for other
Wonderful.
siblings, so we could transfer money in between.
Yeah.
And if there's some money left over, we have nieces and nephews who we would love to help go to college. So
Mhm.
I would say the number one is letting a teenager decide a very expensive decision, and
Yes.
then taking on debt by a decision that a teenager made.
Yes. Yes. Right. Their prefrontal cortex hasn't even fully developed yet,
No.
and they're making a lifelong decision. I know, for me, I often regret that because I could have gone to Morgan State on a full ride. I could have gone to Virginia Tech on a full ride. Um, I had a number of school at George Mason, JMU. I grew up in Virginia, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I did not want to go to school in Virginia because I did not want to see everyone that I went to high school with. And
Right.
that was me as an 18-year-old thinking that I was going to see them everywhere on campus, which was completely illogical. So I went to a private school in North Carolina.
Wow. Wow. Girl. Oh.
And my husband, on the other hand, and he was the first person in his family to go to college. His mom was able to save, and Bowie State had a really inexpensive tuition. It was like the lowest in the state, and so that's how he picked his school. First, he went to community college, and then he went to Bowie State, and then he ended up
Smart
getting
man.
his master's. And he has no debt. And
Smart man.
I've finally just wrapped up paying off my.
Man. So you married well. You married a smart man.
I did. I think I did a good job. I feel pretty good about it.
Absolutely.
But
Because
I
the thing
knew
about that
I
college
couldn't marry
thing,
someone with student loan debt like me because we were
yeah.
just gonna, it wasn't gonna work.
Right. It's true. And I tell people with the college choice, and I understand people have their preferences and all, but the one example I give them is I work for the Washington Post. I've been working for the Washington Post for 3 decades. I know I only look 29. But when I got there, I was 29, and there was another reporter who I think was the same age as I, and he had went to private school in New York and Harvard. And you know
Mhm.
what? We both got to the Washington Post at the exact same time.
Yeah,
I went
yeah,
to a state school. He went to
yeah,
Harvard. We both ended up.
yeah,
And I tell people, look around your job. There are people who went to all kinds of school, community college and four-year universities, or state college, or
yeah.
whatever. And where do you all work? It's not the college; it's the student. And people say, "Oh, well,
Yes,
you make all
yes.
these, connections at these big schools. Somehow all the rest of us who didn't go got good jobs. So please don't let a teenager make a financial decision that will trap you into decades of debt. Um, Make a smart decision. And that's what we've been talking about: managing your cash flow, smart financial decisions, planning. Feel what you need to feel, but don't make decisions based on panic, and have different pots so that when things in the economy happen, you can weather that storm a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah. I love all of this. I love all of this. So I do want to wrap us up so we can go into Q&A. And so just summarizing all of what you shared, if we take a step back, I think what you shared, that it really paints a picture that what creates a certain future, right? It isn't prediction, it's structure, right? Everything you've touched on, there's structure here, right? Especially around the structure is, kid, here's your boundaries, right? In terms of what you can do and what you can't do based off what makes financial sense, right? So you have clarity around goals, we have intentional risk, we have liquidity in the right places, right? Cash flow, and then decisions that are aligned over time. In my experience, I think the individuals who navigate uncertainty best, they aren't reacting faster. They're simply better positioned before uncertainty shows up, right? So I think if you have a plan, which goes back to the beginning of the conversation, right? If you have a plan and you know where you're going and you're putting money in the buckets and you're managing your cash flow and you're saying, hey, we're going to save up for this, we're going to not spend on this, we're going to make sure that we're well diversified, right? That creates the success that we're looking for and the certainty that you're looking for, because now you know where you're going. So when you think about people who get this right over time, what is one behavior that consistently separates them besides they listen to you?
That they use the word no to themselves and to others.
I like
And
that.
that no is a budget. My
Yes.
budget says I can't do this.
Yes.
No, I'm not going to be doing this crazy type of investing. No, you're not going to pressure me into, no, I'm not going to let this kid go to the school where I can't afford.
Yep.
No, I'm not going to put, other people, I'm not going to look at what other people have and try to
Mm-hmm.
match that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You just say no to yourself, say the no to stuff, and you'll just be a lot happier. And and we're not even talking. I'm not about trying to show people how to make a whole bunch of money to have a whole bunch of stuff. For
Yeah.
me, wealth equals freedom, equals financial sanity,
Yep.
financial peace.
Yes.
If something happens, it's hard, but we can weather that storm.
Mm.
And that's really what I'm about, right? Like, just, and I talk to my family about this all the time. We're a really tight family, and I try to teach them, we live a pretty good life because a lot of us, hopefully the relatives listen to me, they just know, let's live within our means.
Yep.
You could still do the things you want, to take your vacations and stuff, but with those years you can't take a vacation, don't take a vacation.
Yep. Yep.
Right. And I think the two words that you said at the top of this is cash flow. Manage your cash flow. Like my pastor says, a lot of people don't have a money problem, they have a money management problem. And when I say I think everybody on this call could be a millionaire, I mean that in a sense of not having a bigger house or, BMW. I mean, you could help somebody go to college. You can donate to a scholarship fund like Level the Field. You can put forth some of that money that you make to make somebody else's life a little bit better, right?
Yep.
And including
Yep.
people you don't know and people within your family. I mean,
Yep.
when I see my niece and how well she and her husband have done, I'm thinking I had a little bit part of that.
You
And
did.
isn't that a good use of my money? Isn't that a
Yes.
good use of
Yep.
having said no to
Yes.
myself when we couldn't
Yes.
afford to do things? That
Yes.
makes me so proud to see how she and her husband handle their money, and other people in my family and people who go to my, read the column, when they send me like, I got a house because I listened to you and
Yes.
I had better decision making. I mean, I think that's what you and I talk about when we talk about building wealth for people. That's what it's really about. Not the stuff that you
Yep.
see on TV and the bling and all of that. It's that
Yep.
if your sibling loses their job, you can cover their mortgage for a couple of months or their car
Yep.
payment while they try to find another job. That's
Yep.
wealth to me.
Yes. And that's legacy too, because what I think about is how will I continue to live on in the minds of others once I've gone? And it's the impact that I make on them in their lives.
That's right.
And so by being able to donate, you can really be that ripple, right, in the ocean that creates all these opportunities for someone and really makes a difference, a real difference for
Right.
someone who may not have had that opportunity.
That's
And
right.
to me, that's how you live forever.
That's right.
Beautiful words to end on. We are learning so much from this dialogue from the two of you, but we have some questions from the audience that we'd love to be able to share with you. So Karen, do you want to, sorry, this is
Yeah, I'll
Karen,
start. Hi,
my
I'm
co-founder.
Karen Lipsey. I'm Christie's co-founder of Level the Field Fund. So the first question someone has asked is, if the market is down and you're trying to wait out the 2 years using cash reserves, and I think they're referring to the time for the market to go back up, how do you handle your required minimum distribution?
Well,
Do you want me to answer or you want to answer?
you'll go ahead, Mary. I mean, the thing is, you better handle it, or you're gonna have to
Yeah.
get hit with a big penalty. So there's no handling it. You got to pay it. I mean,
Yeah.
it used to
Yeah.
be what 50%. Now they reduced it to I think
Yeah.
25%.
Yeah.
But if you don't take that required minimum distribution, you're gonna be heavily penalized.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Mary.
Yeah. So what I say is when you look at your retirement accounts, and let me just say this, when I have clients who are taking RMDs, right, I make sure that we have that 2-year number or a 1.5-year number within their portfolio. So what I would be taking from and selling are the bonds, which should be up or they should be flat, and we're not touching the stock. Okay. And then also too, you want to think about the fact that, if the US is in a recession. So for example, when Japan was in a recession, we were having a great time, right? Japan is coming out of their recession. We're having a little bit of volatility right here and there, but it's still a good year. So this also goes into diversification. Not everything will be down at the same time. So if we were in a recession, I would be theoretically taking money from the bonds, which should again be flat or slightly up. Those are the stabilizers. And possibly some from the international markets, which should theoretically be up at the same time.
So here's a question that relates to Michelle's advice to get a non-retirement account. The question is, where can you find one? Do you go to a commercial bank or a brokerage house? Where do you get this account?
So it depends on who you want to deal with. When I say non-retirement account, it's just opening up an investment account, and there's Vanguard, Fidelity, there's Charles Schwab. I mean, I always have to explain this. The account is like a pot. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, you want to go to a legitimate company, obviously, but it's the pot, and then you put stuff in the pot. So all of them put the same kinds of stuff in the pot for you to invest. So that's my advice. You can, and if with a credit union, they may have some good funds for you to invest. Most of the banks have a component of them, like in full disclosure. For example, I have a Merrill account through my Bank of America. So I put some of my SEP money in there. And I also have money with another company. So you just find what works for you. I look at fees. I make sure that where I'm investing, fees matter, y'all.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need a managed fund. I've had managed funds in the past. So we're just, there's so many options. It
Yeah.
depends on who you want to deal with, but just make sure you look at the fees, I would say.
Yeah. And if I can add to that too, shameless plug for Merrill Edge. So Merrill has a free trading platform, right? Where you can open up an account. So it's called the Merrill Edge platform, but they also have a guided investing platform. So sometimes when I'm talking to people and they're saying, hey, I want to put money in the market, but I don't know where to get started or what to purchase, they actually have like set strategies that are really, really inexpensive. So like 0.03 basis points. Okay. Or and up to 30 basis points, which is, that's less expensive than a lot of mutual funds. And you'll get a diversified portfolio that's like that they do like rebalancing on annually and all that jazz. But like to Michelle's point, there are a lot of options. And I think the important thing is you don't just have to put it in cash, you can put it in the market and you can invest outside of your retirement accounts. So
Right.
make sure you're taking advantage of that.
Great. And then I think this might have to be our last question, but someone has asked if you should open up a Roth account if you are 60. So if you're 60 at that point, is it too late or is it still a good idea to open a Roth?
I'm gonna let Mary, the professional, answer the back part of this, but here's the thing with a Roth: you have to have earned income. So if you're still, is that I'm right about that, right, Mary?
Yep. Yep.
So you have to have earned income. So that's like the more important thing. I'm a different elk in terms of Roth and traditional and all that kind of things like that, because I think you also look at your like we don't have any Roth money because we made too much, and now to do a backdoor Roth, meaning that you would take money from like a 401k and making it so a Roth, you have to have another pocket of money to do that. So it doesn't kind of work for us. But I would say and I'll let Mary answer the where you might Roth or 1K or traditional, but if you're 60, chances are you still, hopefully with your health, you still got 20, 30, 40 years. So it's, to me, it's never too late to invest,
Mm-hmm.
because you gonna hopefully have some life down the road and you want
Yeah.
your money to grow. I mean, you've heard this before. You want the money to work for you, not to work for the money. So even at 60, it's not like your life is over.
Yep.
You take good care of yourself, hopefully, get your checkups, keep your blood pressure down, try to watch what you eat. That's like 20, 30 years. And so it's not too
Easy.
late to invest in a Roth if you have earned income. And if you don't, you could still invest in a non-retirement type of account. You can open up, like Mary said, a Edge account, a Vanguard, Fidelity, whatever. Just get started and put money in on a regular basis. It's called dollar cost averaging. So you say, I'm going to put in $200 a month, no matter what the market's doing. And I'm going to put it in, let's just say, a low cost index fund that follows the S&P 500. And you could do that at 60, you could do that at 65, you could do it at 70. But I would, if you're behind or you're not sure what to do, I'm a big advocate of getting financial assistance from a planner or advisor, so they can look at everything, your insurance needs, when you're going to start collecting Social Security, how much savings you have, what kind of debt. You want a comprehensive plan. Like, don't just say, I want to invest. Like, what's going on your totality of your life, so that you're allocating that money where it needs to go. So, because maybe there's some other things you need to do with that money, like pay down debt. So it's not too late at 60, but Mary, if you want to add to what they could do.
Yeah, I mean, so honestly, I think it all starts with the plan, right? So you need to have a financial plan, and that often tells me whether or not my client should convert to a Roth. So typically, when I'm working with my ultra high net worth families, and I'm going to say that's defined as people that have a net worth of $1 million or more of investable assets. The question isn't whether can they afford the tax, it's whether paying now versus later creates a better long-term outcome, right? Because when you're converting to a Roth, that means you're paying tax at today's known rates. So to Michelle's point, let's say you have a lot of 401k money, right? And you're saying, you know what, I think I want some Roth money. Because I know when I take money out of my 401k, when I'm in retirement, when those required minimum distributions hit, I'm going to be paying at this tax rate. Now, if you convert this into a Roth, right, you're going to pay taxes at today's known rates. So that's going to do two things. One is going to avoid uncertainty around potentially higher future tax brackets. It's also going to avoid uncertainty around changes in federal or state tax policy. And so this becomes really relevant, I think, when your income is temporarily lower, right? So let's say, you're 60 and you're retired and you have other money that you can live off of, right? And you're not getting any earned income. Then you can convert your IRA, however much into a Roth, right? You can basically pull money out of a 401k, put it into an IRA, and then convert that into a Roth, and you'll pay taxes now, right? And so what's good about that for the long term, really when I use it are for when clients want to leave money to their children and they're trying to pay the taxes on it now. Because Roth IRAs give you more flexibility in terms of passing it down to your heirs, and you can pass it down tax-free. Whereas if you were passing down an IRA, for example, let's say, you were to pass your IRA down to your children because your spouse has already died, they have to pull that money out in 10 years. So let's say you're giving them a $1 million IRA account. They're withdrawing $100,000 a year at least because they have to pull all of that out. So you're going to lose a big chunk of that to taxes, right? But you can prepay the taxes now if you say, you know what, when I look at my plan, I don't need this much money, right? I'm gonna outlive my money. I'm going to have excess. So now let me give this to them tax-free. It can grow tax-free. And maybe you can, put that in a trustee IRA. And now it goes to your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, because you can control the withdrawals. Another thing to think about too is, you can do charitable contributions from your retirement accounts, and those will supplant the RMD requirement. So let's say you have to take RMDs. Instead of doing an RMD, you can donate to charity, and then it's basically a tax-free distribution. So there's ways to avoid the taxes on it, but I really love Roth when I go into advanced estate planning and we're trying to do some tax minimization strategies.
But
And that's
isn't
what we're
it
looking at
important
your
for them to
overall.
be able to pay the taxes without the Roth money, the money that they're converting? Should they have money to pay the taxes, or could they pay it?
It depends. It depends. So typically I do prefer that where you can convert it and then you can pay with money outside of it. But sometimes it makes sense to convert it and just take the taxes out. And it really depends on the plan. And there's so many nuances to the particular situation. It depends on your tax bracket. It depends how many years are you going to be tax free. Like there's just so many factors. But that's why, to your point, Michelle, you got to have a plan.
Thank you both so much, Michelle, Mary, for your wisdom and your time. What struck me most was that you didn't just share your expertise, you shared your stories. And both of you have some experience firsthand with what it's like not to finish your education. And so I want to start by thanking the people, Michelle, Mary, who have already donated. Because of you, there's a student who might not otherwise have graduated that will. And this is exactly why Level the Field Fund was started, to help HBCU seniors who have met all the requirements for graduation, but they can't receive their diplomas because they have exhausted every financial resource and they still owe what are relatively small sums of money in the greater cost of a college education. And your donation provides these last dollar scholarships to secure these degrees for these students. And that's a lot of bang for your buck. Candidly, when I first learned of this problem, I was surprised. In the world many of us live in this K-shaped economy that Michelle mentioned, the bank of mom and dad would cover that kind of shortfall. But our recipients don't live in that world. And as I learned about the wealth gap between Black and white families in this country, it began to make sense. One statistic is illustrative, which is the wealth of a typical white family is roughly 10 times that of a typical Black family. This gap is not an accident. It is the result of centuries of systemic racism, from slavery through the failure of Reconstruction, from Jim Crow to the mortgage redlining, to the policies today that are purposefully undoing the progress that Black Americans have made. It's 2 steps forwards, 2 steps back or more generation after generation. And the problem is really compounded because HBCUs are underfunded. 16 states have been cited for underfunding their HBCUs by $12 billion. So the schools can't afford to simply just forgive the debt. And I know this history is maddening, and nobody can solve a problem that has been centuries in the making. But here is what each of us can do right now, today. We can help students who have already overcome 99% of the hurdles cross that college finish line. Every donated dollar goes 100% to our students so they can get their degree, build their financial future, so that they can be the bank of mom and dad for their children, as Michelle was for her children and her niece. In 5 or 10 years, you may not remember the dollars that you give tonight, but these students will remember them forever. So thank you. Thank you again, Michelle and Mary, for this wonderful conversation. And we are happy that all of you were able to participate and hear their wisdom.
Thank you all so much. And thank you for joining us.